Welcome to the Lifeshine Generosity Project, where we promote reckless generosity. My name's John Witt, and I'm your host. And we encourage our guests to shine their light bright on their good deeds and glorify our Father in heaven. Today, our guest is a rocket scientist. He's also the father of quintuplets. He calls himself a recovering engineer. He's the president of Quintessential Financial Corporation. He's a certified financial planner, and he's a certified kingdom advisor. Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here.
So Scott, start us off. Tell us a little bit about the whole rocket scientist, recovering engineer, father of quintuplets. That's kind of a mouthful.
There's a few things in there. I mean,
Yeah.
We all have our own story. For me, I loved math and numbers. My dad didn't want me to become a math teacher, so I went the engineering route out of the Air Force Academy, and one of my first assignments was on the design, build, and launch of spy satellites. So got to do that for the first 10 years of my career. It was pretty exciting. And then went to transition from, while doing that, I was doing taxes and investing, and left the engineering to do the financial planning arena, which had been an avocation turned into a profession. And then shortly into that, I discovered the law of multiplicity or whatever, but of turning what would have been one child into five, and we gave birth to the healthiest quintuplets in our nation's history.
So in many ways, God was generous.
He was very generous.
Very generous.
Yes.
At five. And so in terms of generosity, how did that work out for you?
Well, it was interesting because I was used to being kind of like the giver in life, and suddenly I went from we called ourselves dinks, dual income, no kids, my wife and I back then, and then all of a sudden we turned into sinks, single income and numerous kids, and we were sinking fast. So had to turn around and actually, for the first time in my life, really receive help. And it was a very humbling experience, but really great also. Learned to turn more so to God at that time, actually.
Well, yeah, and not everybody receives help very well.
Right. I mean, we have to combat our pride to do that.
It's hard, There are people who say, "Hey, I don't want your charity," but they really need it, right?
Yes.
And it's because I want to do it, or we want to do it, and we want to make a difference in their lives. So, as a certified financial planner, you've got a certain group of people that probably benefit for your products and services.
Sure.
Can you describe that?
Well, the most benefit, honestly, comes from those who have got more money because there can be more leverage on it. But it's no matter where somebody's at, the advice and the guidance can make a big difference. So whether somebody's just starting out and learning what direction should they be going, how should they be saving and building for the future, that's important, versus someone who's already been fortunate enough to have saved well and now has more potentially at risk, or potentially they can do all the more, where I can help tremendously in that arena also.
So those are some of the problems and challenges that you solve as we go forward here.
And we try to, as much as we love our government, we don't want to give more than we necessarily have to taxation. I think that's been an issue for 5,000 years.
And I don't think it's going to change
Probably won't.
anytime soon. So before we jump into generosity, because I really want to spend most of our time on that, but share some kind of a success story for your, where your clients have benefited, or there's been some other generosity that's displayed itself.
Where, from a work standpoint, have I been able to help somebody to feel perhaps safer, more peaceful in the midst of something that might have normally caused them some tension or worry or anxiety, or not enjoying the blessings that they've received? I've had that several times where someone has, a lot of times through inheritance or some other means, come into more wealth than they're used to having. And when that happens, it's very easy to become fearful about losing what you have, especially when you didn't necessarily have the skills to accumulate that wealth in the first place. So it's natural to have a fear of loss. And what I try to do is help people to create a plan where they can feel comfortable with what they have, secure with what they have, but also secure from the standpoint of now they can do things both for themselves and for others because they don't have to worry. One of the things also, sometimes there's a temptation to become more aggressive. And if that, one of my favorite catchphrases is that if anything that we're doing with money causes you to have anxiety or worry, then we're not going to do that, because the accumulation of worldly wealth should not be to cause you more worry about losing that worldly wealth. It should be there just to give you a little bit more peace. Don't put all your peace in that, because as God says, it can disappear also. So we want to diversify. As I think Proverbs says, disaster can come from any number of directions.
Anywhere.
So diversify to 7, better yet, 8 parts. And we do a part of that also. But having that peace, helping them to see how they're secure, but they can enjoy what they have and they can give out of their blessings to others.
Well, money is such a strong topic, and having good financial advice is so valuable, because, so you could be anxious, worried, because you don't have enough money, right? And you need money to take care of things, right? And then once you have enough money, you can be anxious about keeping it, or doing the right things with it, or not making a mess of it.
Right. Paul likes to talk about that. Don't give me so little that then I, am tempted to steal, or give me so much that I'm tempted not to depend upon God.
So how do we figure out where's that balance? So now we can kind of move into the generosity conversation.
Sure.
In the sense that, it's one of the easiest ways to be generous from an effort standpoint is to, if you've got the financials, if you got the money, is to write a check. It just
Sure.
takes seconds really to write it.
Right.
And I think there's some value. Well, I know there's some value. There's people that need it. People can benefit from that. And I think you can receive some blessings to the extent that you start to feel a little better about yourself. At least you're doing something positive. But when you invest your time or your energy or your effort or your love in a factor of generosity, it seems to me that the blessings are even bigger.
Well, I'd say there's 2 factors in there. One, from the financial standpoint, God knows that our heart is easily drawn to money, because there's more scriptures about money and finance than there is about any other topic, even about God. And so he tells us, out of the 10 that we have to have one finger pried back so that our fists aren't too tight in giving back to God 10%. And that's a base level. And so by doing that, we can, if we all did that, we'd so finance the kingdom across the globe multifold. So that's one aspect, just from the monetary standpoint. But on the relational standpoint, that's where I see the time. That's the most important, because I really believe God made us for a relationship. First with him, but second with each other. And so when we're spending our time in giving, that's where the relationship really comes in, and that's where I think the greater blessing comes.
So share a story about where you've invested your time, your energy in a generous activity and a generous benefit, and what did it do for the recipient?
Sure.
But what did it do for you too?
The one that always comes to my mind as the most impactful for me, and I believe for my daughters also, is we went on a missions trip to Peru, out in the far reaches of the Amazon, and visiting villages out there that lived in mud huts and bamboo walls, and it took an hour in a little pecky boat, we called them, to get there. But the impact of seeing, when you've got, from our standards, virtually nothing, yet they were still filled with joy. We were able to go in there and bring the message of God's gospel and love to them, and help them to be able to share it with others. So it's wonderful for us in doing that. So we got a lot out of that. They got a lot also. And I guess we came back with the most, knowing that all the stuff we got back here, yeah, it's nice to enjoy it, but you don't need it, because you can be filled with joy, enjoy life with virtually nothing. So we don't need to worry in this life. So by going there to give to them, we came back much more secure in life.
So just surprise blessing. You didn't
Yeah.
expect that, right? And that's why it says, you're more blessed to give than receive.
Absolutely.
And we don't go into it necessarily saying, I'm going to get some blessings because I do this.
No.
But God
Some
delivers.
do, though. And God even tells us, that if you do the right things in that way, you'll receive back 100-fold. But if not in this life, then in the life to come.
Yeah, there's some options there. Although I do think that it seems to show up I mean, so I think there's this initial joy, this initial self-satisfaction. I think that's better for physical and mental health because you're doing the good stuff, the right thing, you're being generous. I don't know that we do it because of that, but we get that as soon as we do it, right? We're happy to be there.
I believe we're made in the image of God. God made us and gave us so much, and so it's innate into our nature. When we're being more like God, our tendency is to be more loving and wanting to give. Just as He gave to us life in the world here, we also, in giving birth to children, there's that sense of there's life there we want to give to our children first, typically, but then beyond that, to our brothers and sisters, which is everybody is. If you go back far enough, brother and sister here.
Everybody is at some point. Yes.
At some point,
yes.
right?
Well, we start with our circle, right? There's
Yes.
our family, and it totally makes sense in some ways to be generous to yourself, provided that you're putting yourself in position to serve and give more, right?
And that is huge. I used to think, oh man, I have to give away everything that I'm doing, discount and everything. And a manager who was not Christian but hit me. He goes, Scott, if you go out of business because you're so undercutting yourself, how are you going to help anybody?
Right. If you don't take care of your health.
And your finances also.
And your finances.
So if you're not producing in such a way to have an abundance, how do you have surplus in which to help others? I mean, there's always something you can give, but if God's blessed you with an ability or circumstances to be extra productive, don't shy back from that. Lean into it and be extra productive, and now you have a greater abundance to give even more, which brings also more joy the more you can give.
Right. At the end of the day, as I get older, I recognize that joy is just much more important than it ever used to be.
Right.
It's just kind of why I'm living. Really, I don't have my kids are grown and they're out doing their thing and they're healthy and I appreciate everything that they're doing and I appreciate their love. But that's what I really want, right? It's much more than just the financial side of things. And if I get, when I have an abundance, and I do occasionally, I can make a difference in somebody's life or in somebody's place with that. So I think that whole joy thing is just amazing. When you think about blessings, and this is what I really want to get across to our viewers, is that the blessings come in disguise. You don't know what they look like.
True.
Right? But sometimes they're easy to recognize when they show up. Like, I feel good, I feel better, I'm happier, I'm healthier. Sometimes there are blessings that come along later on.
Right.
God sort of taps you on the shoulder and says, here, I have a gift for you. And you can trace it back to that first, or that whatever that particular event is. And it wasn't like you did it for that reason. It just happened.
Yeah.
Right?
As you're saying that, I was thinking of a friend of mine who exemplifies how I think we should look at everything. So no matter what happens in trials and tribulations, we're still supposed to see the joy in that. So
Count it all joy.
Count it all joy. That is a hard thing to.
Oh, it certainly is.
You can spout the words, but when you're in the midst of trials and tribulations, that is hard. So a friend going through cancer, I mean, that's tough. You never want to hear that C word, right? But when you're going through it, how do you count it all joy through there? So there's a chance where others might see death or pain or suffering or whatever it may be, but if you're seeing, no, this is a temporary life here anyway, so how do I count it all joy? Well, you make a decision. God, you're in control, you're who I'm living for, this is all joy. And it turns out when you're feeling joyful, the endorphins kick in, and endorphins are incredible at killing off cancer.
They do an amazing job.
They really do.
More the better.
Yeah, and she has amazed the doctors with how quickly the cancer cells have disappeared. But there's no assurance that's going to happen. She just decided, I'm going to count it all joy. And at some point, I had another friend that did the same thing, and she defeated the cancer, came back later, and she died. But we're all going to die at some point. So the question is, have we really lived while we were alive?
And have you experienced everything that God has given you to experience, right? Cancer, I wouldn't call it a joy or pleasure, I mean, because there's some pain and everything else.
Absolutely.
But it is an experience.
Yep.
And others can learn from your experience. Others can learn from your approach. And being able to weather that experience.
Facing death helps you appreciate life so much more, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, sometimes you just have a whole new perspective and a whole whole new sense of joy in that particular aspect. So Scott, have you noticed that when you're being generous, in many ways following God's will, that interesting connected, maybe even not connected items happen more frequently?
I think when you have that generous mindset, when you have that, when I have that proper mindset of being willing to answer the call, when the opportunities present to give, good things happen, and it seems like those opportunities present themselves. I was remembering back one of the really nicest things that happened to me was I just moved into a new office down here in Orange County, and we redesigned it to have a conference room. And very shortly after moving in, a friend of mine, Jim, called and asked if I had a conference room now that they could borrow for a business owner's Bible study. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. Yes, I do have a conference room. I'll let you use it under one condition. And he asked, what's that? Can I join your group?
Right, so there's God sort of answering this question.
And I was in need. I was looking for a group to join, and then the group came to me. And so it was a mutual blessing.
Yeah, when I went up to Portland, and through that experience, I got introduced to some folks at the golf club, and they introduced me to the Willamette Christian Church and the Men's Fellowship, and I met a guy by the name of Dallas Lang, who was one of the leaders of the Portland Rescue Mission, and he showed me all about what they're doing. They serve like 1,000 meals a day. Wow. out of that operation, but they also have a home for substance abuse for men and for women, and just remarkable. They have an 80% recovery, 5-year recovery rate out of that organization. And I happened to be in a small group, and the guy in the small group was a volunteer at the Portland Rescue Mission, and he was telling me about it. And then I got a call from Dallas and asked if I would be interested in volunteering, and I said sure. And the guy that I've been talking to was actually leading that group, but he was moving away, and they needed somebody to fill that spot. And I just know that every time I go in and I invest an hour and a half a week, I mean, it's not like a tremendous amount, but I leave there and I'm just feeling like I'm on cloud nine. And there's just, it seems like there's another thing and another thing and another thing. It's all just sort of, and I couldn't necessarily connect all the dots to go right back, but I guess I'd look at it and say it's that abundance mindset. Mm-hmm. When you have an abundance, and that's a generous mindset. Yes. It sort of shows up elsewhere. And there's just all kinds of opportunities. And what a great way to live life, right? As opposed to a scarcity mindset.
No, and it's a connecting with people, building up those relationships. The temptation, sometimes I find myself falling into, I consider it a little bit of a trap of saying, oh, I'm tired, it's easy to turn on a TV. And it's amazing how hours can disappear. But on the flip side, if instead I had made commitments to be involved with groups, to volunteer, in the volunteering, it's almost always in connection with people, relationship, and it's always so much more fulfilling than anything you get out of the fluorescent screen.
I know that from an energy standpoint, if I've got some heavy-duty thinking to do, it needs to be done in the morning. Mm-hmm. That's where my highest isolated energy activity is. But in the afternoons, I could be tired. Mm-hmm. And if I can go meet with people, and if I can go connect, and I can go interact, then the energy level just comes up. It's, I don't know, just pulling it in from the atmosphere, pulling it in, but, so that's kind of how I set up my day up, is to do the heavy-duty thinking. If you're dealing with financials or something like that, it takes a lot of brain power to make that happen. At least for me, it does. Right.
Without the distractions right there.
Right.
Yeah. Right. For me, I find it more from about 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. That's when I feel the distractions are going.
Oh, you still got energy in the evening, man. I can't even do that. Yeah, I can't even do that.
We're all designed differently.
We are. So generosity and this ability, these blessings. And so before we leave the topic, right, mm-hmm. there's this concept that says, let your light shine brighter before others on your good deeds, right? So this is like show everybody, right? But there's this other concept in the Bible that says, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, right? Or vice versa, right? So what do you think of that? How does that connect for you?
Sure, and I have thought about that. I think that when you are giving, your focus should be on what you're doing in the giving. You want to be bold in your helping with others and not worrying about who sees it or what's the critique, but just go forward knowing, with always doing the quick prayers, God, help me what am I to do here? Direct my steps. How do I glorify you? How do I be loving in what I'm doing here? And you don't worry about who's seeing it. You just focus on, you want to be the instrument that God can work through in your being a giver, whether that's money, talents, time, whatever you're giving. I like that phrase, time, talent, or treasures. And so that's where you're being bold, and there's a light that comes from that, but you're not worried about who's seeing
There's
it.
no expectation,
Yes.
and you're not doing it because there is an expectation.
Right, because
You're
God
doing
also
it-
says, don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing when you're giving.
Right, so we're not telling everybody else, I'm great because I'm giving. That is not the intention.
And if your focus is on those that you're helping, you're not
Right,
worried
it's
about
all
who-
about outward focus as
Yes.
opposed to inward focus.
Yes.
And it's easy. I mean, I'm human like anybody else, and I get caught in my inward focus, and I have to go say my prayers and kind of reconnect.
Yeah.
Because we're all made. We have all got sin in some form or fashion, but
We all fall short.
we all fall short. There's no such thing as perfection. God dang, I'm glad that's true because I would just be in a world of hurt.
I think the biggest thing is God's looking. I believe one of the I don't know if it's the number one, but one of the top things that He wants us to acquire is humility. He says pride comes before the fall. It was pride that was the main problem with Satan. Lucifer at the time, bright morning star. It was pride that caused his fall, and it is pride that caused the fall for most of us. When you're giving, when you're serving, as Jesus did, He washed the feet, of the disciples. It's in that servant mentality that we humble ourselves, and that's where God can shine through us.
And God loves humility. God loves humility. When you think in your business, I think of what you do, and you and I have known each other for a long time, and the amount of work and effort and energy that you put into your services and your products. Now, again, granted, it's your business, and this is how you earn an income, and this is how you can make a difference. But not everybody puts in all that hard work and effort. And when we first met, you actually had told me about this thing called structured notes or something. And I had never heard of them. And I've known a lot of financial advisors. I've never heard of them. Can you talk just a little bit about the work that you did and what you uncovered there?
See, now you're giving me a gift because I just get excited talking about this because I'm still that recovering engineer that loves the numbers. So structured notes are basically bank bonds or notes that rather than paying you a fixed interest rate, some of them do pay interest, but it's got some tie into the stock market or some other financial index or instrument. And I love looking for structures that are leveraged to the benefit of my clients. So rather than just investing in a mutual fund or where the market goes up or down and you hope it goes more up than down, in the structured notes that I like to use, a bank has been able to structure, and sometimes I don't know how they do it, I just love the fact they do, where they protect you to a significant degree against loss, like 30, 40, 50% protection against market drops, while giving you more than the market's upside. I've got one that's given, almost 2 times the market upside performance while giving you 30% downside protection. Again, there's details in there and prospectuses, to disclose everything, but that's the kind of stuff I want to be able to sleep at night. I want my clients to be able to sleep at night while they still have a portion of their wealth exposed for growth. Jesus said, put your money at risk for growth. He was referring to our talents at that time. The biggest talent being knowing who God is and salvation. But it translates also to the material talents that we have. Don't just sit on them, put them out there for growth. Some in the bank, for greater growth, some invest in people or businesses. But anyway, structured notes are a great way of reducing risk and actually increasing return on what we call asymmetric risk. Have more upside potential than downside risk. And I love that stuff.
Well, so this is where the rocket scientist, recovering engineer is coming out in you. It's a unique talent you have. I mean, not everybody has it. Not everybody has your experience. Not everybody has that background.
And it's funny because I find myself very few advisors will do this, and I think it's for 3 reasons. One, it does take more math analysis to get into them, so a little bit more work. 2, probably one of the bigger ones. Well, and it changes every month, so every month you have to repeat that because the structures change continuously, so you have to stay on top of them, so it requires continuous work. And 3, they pay a lot less than other financial instruments we deal with. So you're getting paid less and putting in more work, but man, it feels good.
Yeah, well, that's about being generous. It's about doing the right thing. It's about serving your clients more effectively. In terms of, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you some financial questions, maybe some tips for our viewers, right? If you had, and today, we've got a little more market volatility than we
Just
had.
a little.
Yeah. But that happens. It goes up and down.
Sure.
In my life, I've seen it go up and down a few times. So when the market's volatile, right, are there some things that investors should avoid?
Well, not so much just volatility, but right now, if we're going into a recession, and a lot of people feel we are, if everyone agrees that we're going into a recession, then we're not. That's pretty much a universal truth.
Is that a true statement?
Yes.
Because just about everybody agrees we're going into a recession right
which
now.
makes me think we're probably not going into a recession.
How funny. How's contrary?
Yeah, no, it's because it's already priced in.
Okay.
So if everybody is convinced the market is the best place to put your money, you can't lose, then it's already at the top. You better start selling. If everybody's convinced that the market is terrible, it's the worst place, don't ever invest in there because you're just going to lose money, that's the time to step in and buy.
Step in.
So right now, if everybody is convinced we're going into recession, we're probably not. And I listened to a very, I think, a very sharp economist from UC Irvine, Chris, and he's saying he does believe we're going to go into recession, but that in next year, but it'll be very shallow.
A little one.
Yeah, a very shallow one. And I think that's probably the more likely scenario at this point. Again, anything can happen. There's a lot of people, there's a big money manager, Forbes, out there, and he always looks for what are the 2 gaps that none of the economists are really forecasting. He figures one of those 2 gaps that no one says will happen, one of those are the 2 that will happen, and he'll invest in that sleeve. And a lot of times he's right, but he was wrong in 2008. So you never know.
So in terms of things to avoid.
Things to avoid, if we're going into recession, avoid small cap stocks. They always do poorly going into recession because money becomes tight. Just the overall flow of money slows down, and small companies generally don't have the reserves to weather through. So you'd probably want to go into larger companies, and especially ones that have got good free cash flow. So that they can weather a slowdown in the economy, and they'll actually then, if they have surplus cash flow or surplus reserves, they'll probably be able to pick up some companies that are, teetering and therefore cheap to buy up. So that's something to look for. You want to be hesitant right now. I still think in bonds, rates have taken a little bit of a rise up, so you can maybe lock in fixed term bonds, short term, but fixed bonds, not bond funds. Because bond funds, if rates go back down again, you'll lose money in them. I'm sorry, if rates go back down, you'll make some money, but there's still not much downside. If rates continue to go up, you'll lose money in bond funds. But if you have individual bonds where you hold them to maturity, then you're guaranteed of getting your money back as long as the issuer of the bonds still around. So
still solvent.
So you still want a large company, to be back in that, or one that has very good finances where you don't have to worry too much. Real estate's still a good thing, but again, it's become very expensive lately, having gone up so much.
Yeah, I don't know. Real estate is cyclical too.
It
is.
is.
I don't know where that's at.
Actually, the place to be buying right now is more commercial real estate, not residential. So residential has been pushed up so much, but the business commercial side has not been. And a lot of commercial sites are actually down in value because everyone's working from home. So all those office buildings are only half full, especially in New York City. So there might be some good opportunities in there.
Yeah, a big article in Portland about office space that's coming on the market for that kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay, so one other set of tips, if you don't mind sharing. You went from, being a rocket scientist, working for somebody else for a living, to then starting Quintessential Financial Corporation and becoming a small business owner, an entrepreneur. So what are some of the key lessons? Would you mind sharing some of the key lessons you learned in getting that business started?
So key lessons for starting your own business.
But and these typically came from the school of hard knocks. In other
Yes.
words, you did something you thought was going to work, and it failed miserably, and you're like, I'm never doing that again.
Well, I'll share the advice that I give to my children, adults now, and to other clients that are thinking of going out and starting their own business. And that is, don't yet. Always, whatever you want to do, go work for somebody else. That is, find the most successful person that you can in your arena doing that kind of business. Work for them initially for a year or 2 or 3. Be the best employee they ever got. Work your way up so that you're getting paid to learn
The business.
to learn it, to learn the business, get paid while learning, and be their best employee they ever had, so that you keep moving up and learning their business, and always in the back of your mind taking notes. This is what they're doing wrong. This is what I want to do differently. And then you go and start your own. I have one client that did that in Hawaii in a restaurant. He worked in the restaurants there, learned all about it. Then he came here, applied all the things that he saw that was important, like keeping your overhead as low as possible, which meant finding locations that were not really expensive. Only have 1 shift of workers rather than 2, where you always have lots efficiency during shift turns.
Shift change. Yeah.
And so you just have the most profitable was breakfast and lunch, not so much dinner. And he's just doing phenomenally well. But he first worked for somebody with the mentality, I'm going to learn all I can from these successful businesses. Then I'm going to take what I learned from them, apply it someplace else, and do even better than them. And he did. And I think that still applies in the financial planning industry. I suggest you go and work for somebody as a financial assistant, planner, whatever, but work for them. Get a salary, learn all you can, be the best employee they ever had, and be taking good notes then to go out and be your own business owner.
Yes, that's a very strategic process. And I think in terms of college students today, they're coming out and some of them want to be an entrepreneur, some of them have dreams of running their own business. And so that's a very strategic way to go about it. Other people, you don't always get that opportunity.
You don't, but you should still work for somebody first, because the biggest thing is you don't know what you don't know. So okay, I know a lot here, I can do this, but you don't even know the areas where you have complete ignorance about there even being something that you're ignorant about.
Right, unconscious incompetence.
Yes.
Right? We have no idea what we don't know.
Yes.
And I know, first off, I didn't do that. I came out of the corporate world and started my coaching practice. And yeah, there's a couple potholes that I ran into that I didn't know, and they led to some setbacks. And I learned that I got to do things a little bit differently occasionally. I had to shift some things.
Right.
And at this point now, I can share that with my clients as they're learning how to start or grow their own business. Because not everybody has that opportunity, but I do think that that's a really strategic approach to
couple
going
other
into
key
business
things
for yourself. Yeah.
Always start with the end in mind. Always have an exit strategy. So whenever you're starting that business, think about at any time, how do you exit? Whether it's not working out, so how are you going to liquidate and leave? Or it's doing great, how are you going to sell? Or how are you going to transition it? You always want to be having the end in mind. What are you working towards? Your goal, but regardless of, you don't want to focus on it losing. But
you sort of have the end, right? So the
Right.
end in mind is the end of life. So what's your legacy?
Absolutely.
Right? Like
Legacy
there's
is
a point
important.
where you're at the end of this business. What am I going to do there? There's a point where I'm at the end of 5 years. What am I going to do there? So Stephen Covey, one of my favorite authors,
Yes.
wrote The 7 Habits. His comments always start with the end in mind, but the end can be way out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think is great, someone wrote a book called The Unfair Advantage, which was in regards to Christians also, that we have an unfair advantage that our end is beyond this life. So we don't need to worry about failure. We need to worry about not using the talents we've been given, but we don't have to worry about if in the course of using our talents with the idea of delivering more than what we're receiving.
Serving God.
Right? If it doesn't work out, we still are a success if we're using the talents that God has given us to serve others. So even if it fails from a worldly standpoint, you don't have to worry about it. And God promised, say, you'll still have food and some clothing. which is all we have to have. So, and I remember telling my kids that, hey, we could lose our house, we could lose our cars, I could lose my job. You don't know, lose my health. Those things can happen, and but we'll still be okay. It'll become an adventure. We'll pitch a tent, down on the beach, whatever. My wife didn't like me saying those kind of things.
Maybe
But
it's a little more security oriented.
Yes. But the idea being, no matter what we're doing, we can still have joy, even in the midst of trials and tribulations, because we know we're going to be okay.
Right. And those trials and tribulations, that's where you learn. That's where you grow.
I always love saying, when someone's having a wedding, don't hope that the wedding's perfect and there's no problems, because you won't remember it. Welcome the things that go wrong, because you're going to overcome them, and it's going to be those memories of overcoming. That applies to business, vacations, whatever. It's when things go wrong and you overcome. That's where the great memories come from.
That's where
I
the
believe.
great memories come from. That's where the knowledge, that's where the learning, that's where the growth, it all comes from there.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, I really appreciate your generosity, taking the time to come down and visit us on set here and share your wisdom and your thoughts on not just certainly your business and what you do there, but also your thoughts on generosity in the kingdom. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
My pleasure, John. Love you and love what you're doing. Love God, love life. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Wherever you are, if you would, wherever you're joining us today, scroll down, leave a comment, and push that subscribe button. If you'd like to join a community that focuses on joy and generosity, you could join us at www.lifeshine.com. And wherever you are today, wish that your light shines brighter on your good deeds. Thanks and have a great week.